Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of Vaul. And in this video we're going beginner friendly and making this simple house. So for this video I'm going to do this relatively simplistically, but we're going to look at a range of different features and things that you need to know in Blender. We're going to have a look at a range of modifiers, as well as manipulating things like the cursor and the origin of objects to get the end result that you want. Now, I'm not going to use any paid for add-ons in this. The one exception to this is machine tools, and only so that it gives this menu so you can see if I'm going into vertex mode, face mode, edge mode, or edit mode if I forget to say. You can just hit tab normally and go to 1, 2, and 3. The other thing that we are going to activate is a couple of extensions that come with Blender. Now, I've already got these installed, so I don't need to, but just showing you what we're using, we're going to use Ball Tool. You'll need to click Install there, and we're also going to be using Modifier List. Again, click Install there. I just prefer the setup of it, and it makes things a little bit more visual and easy for you to see. So you don't have to use those, but I would recommend it. So we're going to start by deleting out everything. I've got this red coloration. You don't need that, but I have got a video on how to do it if you want to. So we're just going to delete out everything, and we're going to Shift and A and bring in a new cube, just because it's kind of tradition and it's nice to start from scratch. Now, what I want to do is change the size of this because I want this L-shaped like building. And we could do that in a couple of ways, but I'm going to focus on one particular way that I think is quite interesting. And it's useful from a teaching point of view. So you could do this with booleans, but we're not going to. I'm going to hit N, and we're going to get our dimensions up here. And what we want to do is in the Y, we want to change this to 4. So we're just going to put 4 in there. And then we're going to break this into 2 halves so that we can extrude one out. So I'm just going to tab and go into edge mode. For you, that's tab and 2. And I'm going to press Control and R and get this cut perfectly halfway. We can move it, but I don't want to. So I'm going to right click, and that puts it dead center. Then we're going to go into face mode. For you, that's hitting 3. And I'm going to hit E to extrude this out. And we want this to be, well, we've got a width of 2. So we want this to be 4. So we need another 2. So I'm going to hit 2 and then enter. And then we've got our L shape. Now at this point, what I want to do is make a roof. And again, we could do this a number of ways, like creating separate objects, but we're going to do this relatively simplistically. What we're going to do is get rid of some of these edges. So that edge there and that edge there. So what I'm going to do is press A and then X, and we're going to select Limited Dissolve. And that has removed any of the geometry that has not got an angle of more than 5 degrees separating it. So these are angles here. For this edge is obviously 90 degrees, but the ones that were here were 0. Then I'm going to go into vertex mode. So for you, that's 1. Click, shift click here and press J to join that together. And what's nice about this is going to turn this into a quad and this. Now, we don't need to do this on the bottom as well, but we're going to. So still in vertex mode, press J there, just to get everything quads. Now, I generally deal with 3D printing. I do not care about quad topology. Some videos you'll find will really care about it because they're interested in objects that are going to deform or certain rendering techniques. So if someone says everything has to be quads, they're wrong. It depends on your usage. For 3D printing, I really don't care about it. But either way, this will work out fine for what we're going to do. Now what I need to do is put an edge down the center of this. So I'm just going to press Control and R again, and we're going to do an edge loop here that perfectly works its way around this object. Let's just right click so it's centered, so that we get this in the middle and it follows this quad topology. We're going to go into 2, so I'm going to tab and go into edge mode using machine tools, but you can just hit 2, and we're going to select this edge, and we're going to press G and then Z, and then move this up however much we want. I think about there looks good. Now I'm looking at the top left hand corner where it says that this is about 0.59. So I'm actually going to type in 0.6 to get it exactly 0.6 in height. And the reason for that is that I want to put this bit here to be angled inwards. So what we're going to do is go into vertex mode. For you, that's 1, click, shift click, and press J again to join that. I'm going to select this, G, and then looking at my gimbal in the top right hand corner, I can see I want this on the Y axis, so I'm going to hit Y, and then it's now locked to the Y axis, and I can type in 0.6 again, and I know that's a perfect 45-degree angle. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. Click, shift click, J, And we could do this a different way as well, which I'm just going to mention. That is, I could hit GG and move it. But you'll notice now, this is called a vertex slide, and now it's measuring it from 0 to 1. If I go all the way along this edge, it's 1. So I can't do that 0.6. So that's the reason we're not doing it this way. So G and then X, because we're now on the X-axis, and this is going to be minus 0.6. Hit enter, and we're ready to go. Now you'll notice at this point we don't have quads everywhere. For example, this face here is a triangle. And while we could worry about that for this, again, it's not really relevant. This is going to be a solid object. Even if you were rendering this, it wouldn't be a problem that this is not quads. What we're going to do now is add in some windows. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. But what I want to do is effectively divide this up into quarters and then use the centers of that for my windows. So I'm going to Control and R to put in a center edge there. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. So we've got that all the way around. Now, this is divide this into quarters. So we've got a quarter on each of these, but I want to find the center point of each of these faces. And there's several ways of doing that. I could Control and R, put in an edge loop there, Control and R, put in an edge loop there, and that will have worked. Or I could, if I want to come to this one here, select those edges, Control and E to bring up my edge options and subdivide, and we'd get that done there. So you've got loads of different options there. I'm just going to continue with my Control and R just for this. And this leaves us now with vertices there, 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 and there. This is where we want our windows to be centered on. So what we're going to do is tell Blender to start our new object at this point. So I'm going to select my vertex, Shift and S, and then I'm going to cursor to selected. And the cursor is where your objects appear. So I can now go into object mode. You just need to hit Tab to come out of edit mode. Shift and A, mesh, and we'll bring in another cube. This is going to be far too big. That's S to scale this down. Somewhere maybe there. And then let's S and Y to scale it on the Y-axis to make this a wide window, somewhere about there. Probably looks about right. Now, if you want to be able to see all of those lines that we set up, if we come up here to our viewport overlays, we could click to have wireframe, and now I can see where all of the wires are that are allowing me to work out where everything is. And that looks pretty good. I want this to be thinner because we're going to boolean this out to make an indent. So let's S and then X to get that to about there. That probably looks about right. Now I also want to have a windowsill. So what I'm going to do is be really lazy and select this object, Shift and D to duplicate it, and then Z to perfectly bring it down. So once again, that was just Shift and D to select. You don't click anything at this point, just Z, and then bring it down to somewhere there. And I'm going to S and Z to shrink that to maybe something there. Now I want this perfectly at the bottom of my window. I don't want there to be a gap. So I'm going to go to side view, I'm going to press G, and I'm going to press B, which activates something called snap base. And this is going to snap to various things, but we have to tell it what to snap to. At the moment, I want it snapping to edges. Now you'll notice up here, I've got this set to a mix, vertex, edges, and faces, because I find that useful. But you need to make sure that the edge is clicked. If you want to do more like I do, just hold down Shift and select multiple ones, and then it can snap or recognize different things to snap to. So G, B to activate snap base, we're going to go to that edge. It's going to have these sort of arrows pointing at it, click, and then we're going to hit Z to say only move in the Z axis, and it's going to snap to this edge. So there we go. I think I want this a bit wider, so click on it, S and then Y, make it a little bit wider than the window, and that's what we're going to end up with. What we need to do at this point is make multiple versions of these. We haven't booleaned anything out yet, but I want lots and lots of these on each edge or each side of my building. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get one at the top here. Now we could do this as an array, which might be a nicer option because it's just going to move everything up quickly, or we could duplicate it. What I think we'll do here is we will array it just for simplicity. Now, from the lines on the side here, we can tell that this is one Blender unit apart. I can see, let's just go into edge mode, I mean this edge and this edge. So we want my window to go up by, well, one Blender unit or whatever units you're using. So what we're going to do is use an array for this. So I'm going to click this window. I'm going to come to my modifier panel and we're going to click add. And this is one of the things that modifier list gives you, this much nicer visual display that Blender used to have and then they changed it. So we're going to go to array, and at the moment we can't really see much because it's arraying relatively and it's moving on the x-axis, which is this way. So we don't want that. We're going to turn that off, turn on constant offset, and we want to put our x down to 0. Instead we want our z to go up. Now we could do this in several ways. We can just drag this so we can move it to approximately where we want it to be, which is there, or we could put in a set value. But you'll notice I said that this is, well, 1 unit higher, and we're getting to something like 4. That is because this object here, and we can see this in the N panel, if you don't have that open, hit N, we've scaled this object, and that scale translates through to the offset. So what I'm going to do is press Ctrl and A and apply the scale. And now this movement of 4 has it all the way up here. We don't want that. We want it somewhere about here, which is the 1 we expected. So I'm just going to click here and hit 1. We want to do the same for this, so our windowsill. So once again, I'm going to Ctrl and A and apply the scale, and then we can do exactly the same thing, or we could just copy this modifier across. So what I'm going to do is click here, shift click here, and then come here, and then copy modifier to selected. And suddenly this has now gained this modifier with a constant offset. So it's now up here. Great. Now at some point what we're going to do, in fact we could do this now, is we're going to click on this object and we're going to boolean it out of our building. I'm just going to turn off my wireframe because it's getting annoying seeing it. So click here, shift click here, and then Control and minus is the Boolean option, and that's using bool tool, which we activated earlier. So we've now got our windows and our edging underneath the window. Now at this point we want, well, this on more than just these sides. We want this all over the place. We want windows on here, 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 and here. So we need to get this working in a bit more of an efficient way. Now what we're going to do for this is we're going to actually mirror this across this building. So this is relatively simple. So we'll just demonstrate this. We're going to click, we're going to add a mirror modifier, and then we're going to tell it to do it on this object in the Y direction. So we don't want the X, we just want the Y, and we're going to click here and select this object. And now it's jumped it across to here. Now for this one, I can do exactly the same thing as what we did earlier. We're going to click, shift click on this, go to our mirror, and we're going to copy modifier to selected, and now that has copied everything across with all of the same settings, so we're good to go. However, we want to do this on this side as well, and you can see here we've got options of doing these on multiple axes. So if I click this and then tell it to mirror across the x-axis, this should come up here, except for it's not going to. Let's have a look at this and explain why not. So at the moment it's here. Well, that's great for this object, or this side, but not for here. This is a problem. So we've got several ways of doing this, but what we're going to do is manipulate the building a little bit, because this is probably easier to solve later. There's any way around of doing this, but I want to show you how to manipulate the origin of this object. And at the moment, when we do a mirror, the mirror goes across this origin, and the origin being here has meant that this has now gone onto this side, and we have them in the middle. Effectively, it's mirrored it across this blue dot. So if we want these windows to be all the way over here, we need this blue dot to be, well, here. Loads of ways of doing that, but we're going to do it in a way that people often miss out, which saves a load of time. I'm going to click this object, and we're going to go to Object, Set Origin, and we want to set the origin to the geometry. Now this, if we come to the top view, has gone here, which is the middle of the geometry as far as Blender is concerned, because Blender thinks, well, this is where all the vertices are, and it averages out what it thinks of in terms of their weight. But we don't want that. We want to imagine this building is basically a perfect box here, and we want it in the center of that box. And you'll notice I've got this set origin from my last action. So if I just undo that, so just to show this again, we're going to object, set origin, origin to geometry, and we're going to have this here. If it's really small, you just click to make it bigger, and we don't want to set this to the median center. We want to set it to the bounds center, which imagines this like a big box that's going around the object perfectly. And suddenly this is now working over here, which is great. That's what we want. And we'll deal with these windows in a little bit. So we're going to do exactly the same thing for this. We want this also in the X, so they suddenly appear over here, and pretty happy with that. Now what I do want to do is add them on this side. So what we're going to want to do is click, shift click, duplicate this, and then rotate it. But we need to tell Blender what to rotate around. It can't just magically know where we're rotating around. So we want to rotate around, well, this origin. So what we need to do is select options of what we rotate around. For example, we could rotate around the active element and things like that, but we want to, in this instance, rotate around the 3D cursor and put the 3D cursor there. So let's Shift and S. We're going to cursor to selected, so now the 3D cursor is there, and we can now select our objects here. Come here, change this to the 3D cursor, Alt and D, R, and now we're rotating around correctly. Now this is going to look a little bit funky the way they cross over each other, but we want to go to here, which is 90 degrees. You can again see that in the top left hand corner. I'm going to just type in 90, and we've got these to the correct place. Now, because these are new objects, the booleans haven't occurred. So what we're going to have to do is click, shift click, control and minus, and once again we've got the booleans working. Now, the astute of you might have noticed that when I did this, to duplicate it, I pressed Alt and D instead of Shift and D. You can duplicate with Shift and D as well, but what Alt and D does, which is very nice, is it will link the objects together. What that means, and I'm just trying to get this view so I can see this here, so I can see my two sets of windows, because these are now linked, if I go into vertex mode, and then S and then Y, you'll notice that it scales all of the windows, not just one of them. I should change this off to our individual origin. That's why that was scaling strangely. So S, Y, and then you'll notice all of the windows scale. So using Alt and D and linking the objects together is going to make us much more efficient in our modeling, as we can move all the windows in one go. Okay. So we now have some windows here that are just hanging out in the middle of nowhere. We've got a few ways of dealing with this. Now at the moment, what's great about Blender and why it's such a good program is that all of this is non-destructive. I can move things around if I choose to and edit things as I was doing for that single window. But at some point, you need to get destructive, or at least partly destructive. So what we're going to do is basically get destructive at this point. What I'm going to do is select here, and we're going to apply these modifiers. So I'm just going to come here and apply all modifiers, and apply to active object only. This means that I'm breaking the link that I put between them. So we're going to do that. And then I'm going to do the same for the window sills at the bottom. So again, apply to active object and break the link. What this means now is I can select these, go into vertex mode, and I have the vertices available, and I can Shift and Z to go into X-ray mode, select those there, and then just G, and then X these across to the point where they're intersecting my object, and we've got the boolean working. So that's the first way of doing this. The other way that is semi-destructive that we can do now that we've got this is that we can tell Blender to pretend that we've applied the modifier. We do this by going Add and then say Edit Mesh. That will lock all of the information earlier. We're going to come here and do the same thing for this one. And it means that, again, if I click on it, I can access all of these vertices. If this wasn't here, let's just clear that and then clear that for this one as well. And I'll select these and go to vertex mode. You'll notice there's no vertices here to move around. We've only got the vertices of the original single object that was then arrayed and mirrored. So that is why we're having to do this destructively, or we could just copy the windows and put another one across. So let's come into object mode. Here, as we did before, edit mesh, and then here, as we did before, edit mesh. Select this and this, tab into edit mode. We're going to use vertex mode, Shift and Z to go into X-ray mode and select just those vertices, And then once again, let's come into side view, G and then Y, and bring that over to here. There we go. That's going to be my windows. Now at this point, this is leaving this one out here. It's just sitting in the middle of nowhere. Now I'm not going to use this for my door, so what we'll do is we'll just effectively get rid of this in a little bit of a cheeky way. We're just going to Shift A, Mesh, bring in a cube, and I'm just going to position that cube over the top of the thing that we want to get rid of. Let's just G and set that down. So now I can click the cube, shift click this set of windows, Control and minus to boolean the cube out of that selection of windows, and then click and then shift click again on the window sill and do exactly the same thing. So what we've done is we've removed those additional parts, but they are sort of still there. It's just that this has got this boolean acting on it. If I unclick this to hide it, we can actually bring these back and you can see that they are there. But this is a nice effective way of hiding things, but we could have deleted the geometry as well. Let's bring in a door then. So this is going to be a bit more just standard, Shift A, Mesh, and then we're going to bring in a cube. Let's just S to scale it down, come over to here to where the door's going to be, and basically get this to a valid door size. Something like that looks about right. This is going to be far too thick, so let's S and Y, bring it down to about there, and that looks okay for my door. I think we're going to put a step in, so we're just going to select this and Shift and D, and I want this perfectly in line with the bottom of this. So I'm just going to hit Z to get it down a bit so it's easier to select just this one. G, B, this is using stat base again, hit that edge, and then Z to keep it in the Z axis, go to there, and we know that's perfectly in line with the bottom. Vertex mode, so tab to go into vertex mode, Shift and Z to go into X-ray mode, select all the vertices at the top there, and then just G and Z that down. Again, if we want this to be perfectly in line with the door, GB, and then Z, and we've got that going. In object mode now, so tab out, I'm just going to S and scale it on the X axis, so hitting X to make this a little bit wider, and I want it sticking out a bit further forward, so S and then Y, so we've got a nice decent sized step for our house. Then we need a door frame for this door, and I think this door actually might need to be a bit taller. Let's just tab into vertex mode, Shift and Z again, select those, G and Z that up. So we'll go about there. And then once again, because we're going to be doing some stuff with sizes and scaling, I'm going to Control and A and I'm going to apply the scale, just so that everything's set to 1. That is a very good standard thing to do. I'm going to Shift and D to duplicate it. And to make this a bit more visually interesting, I want a bit of a gap between the door and the door frame. So I'm just going to S and scale this up just a tiny bit. If we go into X-ray mode, you can see I'm just making a bit of a gap. Let's just G and Z that down to equal that gap up. And we've got what's going to be our door frame. Now, we could do some tricky things with this, but the easiest way to get this working is we're just going to delete out the parts that we don't want and then thicken the bits that we do. So again, we'll use a modifier for this, but first into isolation mode, so this is easier to see. Go into face mode, so for you that's tab and 3, and click that face, shift click that face, and shift click that face there. And then we're just going to X and delete those faces. So now we've just got this arch, or this squared off arch, that we're going to use as our door frame. Tab out of isolation mode, come back into object mode, and we can see our door frame with a little bit of a gap that's just going to look a little bit more visually interesting. So for this, we're going to use another modifier. We're going to come to add, and we're going to add a solidify modifier. Now we want this to solidify there, so there we go. That's sort of about right, except for if I come and look in front view, you'll notice this does not look particularly equal. It's scaled or thickened more at the bottom than it has where there's an angle to it. To fix that, all we need to do is select this option over here. It says even thickness, and suddenly you'll notice that looks much better. And we could either have this sticking out further than the door, something like that, or equal to the door. I'm probably going to have it equal to the door just so we can see that there. So at this point, we've still got these Boolean objects that we can see the outline of. We're going to click on those and hit H to hide them. Click on that and click H to hide them. And we're good to go. Now, just in case this comes up, if you ever want to edit these windows, all you need to do is find the cube that this Boolean is working from. Now, what's nice about this modifier list as well is that if I click my Boolean here, I can scroll down where it says show. And I click that and suddenly it brings back the cubes. Or I could do it for this one and click show, and you can see again those cubes and their outlines are back. So this is a really simple way of being able to hide the different parts of your Booleans and bring them back if you need to. So there we go. That is our simple house. We've used quite a range of tools, including modifiers, and manipulated our origin and our cursor to get this to be as easy as possible to make. At this point, you could add any additional details that you wanted to. As I said, you could have done the roof as a separate object, or you could add some more elements to the doors or windows, for example, the frames or the internal supports for those windows. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. I tried to explain in enough detail, but not too much that this got really tedious. If you'd like to see more videos at this level, please do say in the comments section. Also, commenting really helps the channel out and other people to see the video. Hit like if you thought it was worthy, and if you want to get these videos a week early and ad-free, and also have the most influence on telling me what sort of videos you want to see, do consider joining the Patreon. It's what supports the channel the most, and is what pays for me to have the time to be able to create these videos. Hope to see you in the next one, and have a great day.